that when you have a lot going on, you can do a lot of things pretty well, but usually you can't do a lot of things exceptionally well. I have to leave this clip in here so everybody knows what happened to me, because I'm not going to go inside and change. Hey guys, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. If you have not met me yet, my name is Heather, this is Winnie, and I live on almost 10 acres in southwestern Kentucky with my husband Levi and our 4 kids, and we've been homesteading here for 5 years. We just passed our 5-year mark for owning this farm, and we absolutely love this lifestyle. So it is about this time every year since starting our YouTube channel that I get questions about how I do it all. Heather, how do you possibly manage it all without getting overwhelmed? And I also get comments of concern about, Heather, when do you get you time, or when do you get a break from, you know, all of the responsibilities that you have? And so I wanted to address that here today again, because I know it's not necessarily something that people are worried for me about, but it's kind of a busy time of year for everybody, and these are feelings that a lot of people have, and it's really hard to navigate. So I will give you my answers to these questions from my own perspective with Winnie, but in no way am I trying to tell you that you should be doing it a different way, or that you should be doing my way, or that my way is the only way that works. This is just what works for me, and I'm just going to be sharing my experience. Are you stuck? So let's start just by going through kind of an average day. I did just do a video that showcases a little bit of an average day. I started filming probably around 11 o'clock in the morning, so I didn't get the whole day kind of worked in there, but that was a pretty good example of what happens on any given day. I will say that I am not a morning person, and so I do not get up early. My husband's alarm goes off at 6 o'clock, and if I got up that early, I could probably get more done, but at this point I don't necessarily feel like I have to. But when the summer starts coming on super hot, I may have to. Right now our days are getting kind of hot, but it's pretty mild, so I'm not in a huge rush to get out to my goats or to get out and do things before it gets too hot to do so. And so I'm kind of, you know, a little bit lazy in the morning. It takes me a while to get up and to get moving, but I usually try to have breakfast on by about 8 o'clock, and I don't always make it. So the rule that I like to have for our house is each meal should have something farm related included. I don't care what it is, I just want one thing to be of the farm so that we're going through the things that we are working so hard to produce. This morning actually it was just cereal with our raw milk, and that happens relatively often. I'd say that I cook probably 4 breakfasts out of the week, maybe 3 or 4, depending on the season. Some seasons I have a lot more time for stuff like that, and some seasons I don't feel like I do. So I'm grateful to have some older kids that are pretty self-sufficient. They can make themselves a bowl of cereal. We're working on teaching them how to cook eggs, and so that's really awesome. So I'll occupy my mornings mostly with social media stuff. I post in the mornings 3 times a week, and I'll be answering comments and answering questions and answering emails and doing a lot of back and forth correspondence in the morning time just to help myself wake up when I make my coffee. But when it comes to the homesteading stuff, there's more than one thing that's really helpful in getting a lot accomplished. It's having different tools and systems in place that help kind of automate the farm, and it is also multitasking, and those tools are kind of part of that. So this morning, before I really did anything, I got my dishwasher going. That's one of the things that I like to do in the morning instead of in the evening, is get the dishwasher going. So I had that going, and while that was running, I was preparing the freeze dryer with mushrooms and cilantro. And then while the freeze dryer was running and the dishwasher was going, I was able to make some cottage cheese out of some clabbered skim milk that I set out a few days ago. Winnie found a snack. Look at this little butt. She's learning how to be a milk goat. Yes, she is. And we're multitasking right now. So we're teaching Winnie how to be a milk goat. I can touch her udder and I can make content. I thrive multitasking, and I know that is not the case for everybody, but it's really how I get a lot done. So the freeze dryer is doing its thing, and I came out to milk, and usually when I come out to milk, that's when I tell my kids, hey, you guys need to be doing your animal chores. So our kids for the most part, raise the chickens and the rabbits. So the breeder rabbits are something that I deal with here in the barn, but our grow out rabbits and our buck rabbits, that's their responsibility. So they feed and water the bunnies, they make sure that they have everything that they need. And actually recently when we started filling up some garden beds, they were there with shovels and buckets, cleaning out underneath those rabbit cages and helping fill the garden beds. So the kids have outside responsibilities as well as inside responsibilities. Our house is really, really small, and we have 4 kids. We're able to split up the house into zones, and everybody has a different zone every day that they're responsible for cleaning. So my responsibilities are less so. I mean, they don't do an amazing job. They are kids, but they can get a lot of the mess that they make picked up, and it's really, really helpful. Most of the time, it's just basically my desk and the kitchen that's my responsibility. And full disclosure, this is what my kitchen looks like this morning. I haven't really touched it. I did run the dishwasher and unload it, like I said, but it's a functioning kitchen and I'm doing things all of the time. It's basically never clean, and that is completely okay with me. So I get done milking, and on the average day, it's usually around lunchtime. And around lunchtime is when we start our school day, on days that we do school. So I only homeschool 4 days a week. And the beautiful thing about homeschooling is you really can do it on your own time. It does not have to be at a certain time. It does not have to be Monday through Friday. You can homeschool on the weekends. You can homeschool through the summer. And honestly, that is what I like to do. I know normally there's these like set vacations that public schools have, like for springtime, there's one in the fall, and then the big break for the summer. And I actually need different times where I don't need the responsibility of doing school. One of those times is kidding season in the springtime. I like to have my head completely in this space so I can be here for my does, you know, at a moment's notice when they need me. And we also really like to take a break in the fall time for when the deer harvest and the goat harvest, like the meat harvest, really kicks off, so that we can have all hands on deck dealing with, you know, multiple large animals and putting them in the freezer. So I personally like to school through summer, and because I mean there is a significant part of the day in the summer where it's just too hot to be outside, and if we're going to be inside, we might as well be doing something productive, and so we'll do school inside. And the way that it works for us is almost like a one-room schoolhouse kind of setup. I do have like a range of ages that I'm teaching, and so I can't do that for everything, but here's an example. We'll have like writing time, and right now the kids are working on perfecting their cursive, except for our youngest. He's still trying to figure out print. He's doing really well, but I can show the big kids how to form a letter or form a word and give them a worksheet to work on where they don't need my help and they don't need my individualized attention, but the little one does. He needs a lot more help with what he's doing. They can do that while I am teaching their brother, and so that's really nice. We do reading, writing, and arithmetic on the days that we do the formal school, and everything else is just sort of worked in throughout the day. So I mentioned that we will start our school time around lunch. They have made their own lunch. They put their own lunch together, and while they are eating it, I'm reading a little bit of history or something from one of their reading lists, something like that, to kind of break in school time while they're eating. And then the rest of the school time with math and writing and a little bit of reading, it doesn't take maybe 2.5, 3 hours on a bad day. They can breeze through school in 1.5 to 2 hours on a good day, depending what we have going on. And speaking of bad days and good days, I will choose the day of the week that we do school based on usually the weather. So this week was supposed to be kind of bad for rain. Today was supposed to be pretty bad for rain. It looks like tomorrow was supposed to be pretty bad for rain. When today turned out to be a good day, I decided that we were not doing school, because if the next handful of days end up being bad and keeping us inside, I'd like to save the school time for that and keep, you know, the nice days for doing outside time, because there's a lot of learning to be had on a farm and on a homestead. And so if they can be outside actively immersed in this world, they're going to be learning so much. An example is, so I was milking my goats, I think it was when my friend Megan was here on the video that I took. My daughter Addison, she found a bird nest that fell down, sadly, and there were eggs in the nest, and there were partially developed chicks in the eggs. And so she found this mess on the ground. She picked it up, and she you know, use it as a learning experience. She said, Mommy, this baby chick, it doesn't look like a big chickie. She sees the big chicks, they fall out of the trees in the front yard all the time, and she actually hand rears them up until they fledge, and it's really awesome. But in looking at that partially developed chick, she noticed that it wasn't quite the same, and so we got to use that as a learning experience. Like, yeah, it takes them a while to develop into what you know, but this is what it looks like inside the egg. You know, why don't you go show that to everybody else and then go make sure you wash your hands. But that was an experience that you don't normally get in a public school setting that they got here, just by chance, just by moving around the farm and doing what they do. And that kind of thing absolutely counts as school, and it has so much value. The kids at this point, they've figured out, I mean, I don't even know how many plants they're able to identify, but I've gotten to the point where I trust them now to help me weed the garden, because I know they're not going to pick anything that's valuable. They'll pick the weeds, and they'll leave even the volunteers of things. If they can see that it's a tomato, they usually won't pick it, or they'll ask me if they can move it into their garden. They're smart. They've learned a lot just by living. So when school is done, it's usually around 3:30, and during the winter months, there's usually only about an hour and a half before the sun goes down, and that's still a little bit of time for me to do something. But in the summertime, that's a lot of time for me to be able to go out and do things. So this is the time of day it is right now. I'm able to sit and make a little bit of content before I have to worry about going inside and making dinner, which is another thing. On the video that I made when I showcased my whole day, I did actually make dinner that day. I probably only make dinner, like actively make dinner, 3 to 4 times a week, just like I do with breakfast. I never make lunch. My kids get their own lunch, but breakfast and dinner, I don't do it every day. It's not really necessary. We do have a lot of leftovers, and some days I get caught up with something and I don't have like the time or the headspace to make dinner, and that is when my husband, he comes home and he'll, you know, take the wheel and he'll make dinner. An example of that actually just happened yesterday. So we installed the shade cloth and flow fans inside the greenhouse, and it is so nice to be in there right now. So I was in there. It was around dinner time that I decided I'm gonna go in there and string up my peppers. It's a really cool way that I'm trying to grow peppers this year. And I got kind of sucked in to working mode, and my husband recognized that, and he created like a chip dip out of some clabber cheese from the freezer and some leftover goat that we had from entertaining a couple of friends the other day. We made a ton of roasted goat leg and shoulder, and it was awesome. We had a lot of leftovers. But here's the important thing that I really want everybody to realize, is that I absolutely don't do everything. I do a lot of things. You guys follow me around the farm because this YouTube channel, it's my baby. It's the thing that I wanted to do. But the truth is that there's a lot of hands that go into life around here that make everything possible. I could not do everything. I could not do the whole farm, the homeschooling, and the YouTube channel. It would never work if it was all on me, and it isn't. And I don't ever want it to look like that's the case. So here's an example. The other day, I guess it was probably 2 weeks ago at this point, I filmed a video of me putting away the rabbit from rabbit processing day. One of the totes of meat rabbits went into cans, and I videoed that. What I didn't video was my husband packaging up and freezing the other tote of rabbit and the 3 goats. You guys didn't see that. It happened, I don't know, I was probably milking at a time when that happened. But my husband does a bunch on the farm as well as a bunch with our kids. So those few days a week that I don't cook dinner, normally he does. He actually makes breakfast every morning on the weekend. Sometimes he has 3-day weekends and he's the one making breakfast. He works for his brother, and it's a very relaxed environment. It's very chill. He gets a lot of fulfillment from doing his job. My husband loves to work with his hands, and he gets a lot of fulfillment from putting his hands to something and then being able to stand back and seeing the beautiful work that he did. So it's not like the work that he does is so incredibly draining that he comes home from work and just has to veg out, like that he's tapped out for the day. That's not the type of job that he has, and we're really grateful because that used to be the situation where his job was just so draining on his emotional and mental state that he did not have any capacity to really do well as a father, as what we really need him for. So this job that he has with his brother totally allows him the extra capacity to come home and pick up where I left off. Some days Maybe it's I'm in the middle of cheese making and my bees swarm on a pole. I need to go deal with that, and by the time I'm done with the swarm, you know, my cheese is an hour and a half past due for needing the next step, and I completely voided the dinner plan out of my mind. He will absolutely pick that up and make an amazing dinner for us, and he does it very often. He also does the dishes, he also does the laundry, he also does a lot of cleaning. He does a lot of stuff, especially within the household, that allows me the space to do other things. I've showcased it a little bit on the channel recently. Every night my husband reads again to the kids after dinner. He'll alternate between Bible passages and something from their reading list. So once he's done with a certain book in the Bible, he'll change to an entire book from their reading list, and he'll go back and forth like that. And he gets the kids, you know, set up for their showers. He makes sure they brush their teeth, and he gets them in bed every single night. So basically, when he comes home from work, child duty is on him, and that frees me up to do a lot of things in the evening that bring me a lot of joy. It allows me to kind of step back and get my me time, and that's where that comes in. I think a lot of people, when they ask, Heather, do you get any time for you? They assume that I want to leave the farm and like go get a pedicure. I do not. I do not. I do not want to go on vacation. I do not want to go to the mall. I don't want a pedicure. Hi, baby. Woo! You guys. Just like how my husband gets a lot of fulfillment out of his job, I get a lot of fulfillment and cup filling from just being here and doing things. I will say it is super helpful to have different areas of the farm to be able to kind of rejuvenate things. So if I only had goats and I only did goat things, I could see myself getting a little bit burnt out on that. But I have the goats and I have the garden, and we've got bees and different places where I can put my attention, and the change of scenery really is rejuvenating for me. And especially at the end of the day, it's very nice to come out to the farm and simply enjoy it. It's something that I don't get to do a lot of the times in winter. There's not a lot growing and it's cold, and there's really not a lot to do, but in summer we get to really come out and appreciate our farm, and it's one of my favorite times of day. And sometimes I'll even just leave the table when Levi does his reading time with the kids. I'll just come outside with some animal crackers, feed the goats, weed the garden, and that genuinely is my happy place. I do not need anything more. And in the evenings while my husband is putting the kids to bed, yeah, that's usually when I edit videos. I also will do a little bit of editing in the morning time too. And I neglected to clarify that, you know, while other things are going on, like while I'm milking or even while we're doing school, there's usually something else going on in the background. So I might have some bread rising to have with dinner. I might be making cheese while I'm doing school with the kids. There's a lot of things that can be done while something else is getting done. And like I mentioned before, that's genuinely how I think so much is able to get done. As you probably noticed from the glimpse of my kitchen that you just got a little bit earlier, you probably can tell that I am not the world's tidiest person. And I think maybe that can tie into how so much gets done. That's because other things genuinely don't. Now, we don't live in filth. There's just a lot going on, and I don't try to have, you know, a Better Homes and Garden type kitchen. I don't know a magazine for a really clean and put together barn, but I don't have that either. But I used to have a clean house. I can remember having a clean house when we lived in Kansas. I didn't have a farm. I didn't have as much going on. My kids were really little. They were barely starting to do any kind of learning, like really basic short stints of learning throughout the day. But I kept a very clean house in Kansas. And one of the ways that I was able to clean house was I would invite my friends over every Friday. We called it coffee day. Every Friday I had a certain group of moms over, moms and military spouses, and we had a blast. And having that accountability, I knew my friends were coming over every Friday. It really helped nail in the discipline of me being able to clean my house. And I can say that I have a lot of that going on with this YouTube channel. But especially with like the garden tour type season, which we're in right now, I'm a lot less likely to procrastinate like mulching and getting things actually planted in the garden if I know, you know, 12,000 people are gonna show up and see my garden in a week. It's a very motivating, so that absolutely plays in as well. I think a lot of discipline is sort of dependent on accountability, and I have that accountability here. Having said all of that though, I really want to stress that there are absolutely seasons for things. If I had to do spring all of the time, I probably would burn out. Knowing that the busy time of spring has its beginning and it has its end, and I know the fruit that comes out of that hard work, there's an end there, there's a reward, there's a period of rest that I can look forward to. So I know that this doesn't last, this busy spring season, and so it makes it less difficult as the years go by, feeling the patterns, the repetition that happens on a homestead, that I know that it doesn't last. I know that this is hard right now, but it's not gonna be hard forever. And so it really helps with kind of just plugging along in the season that you're in. Usually in homesteading, people are thinking a season ahead. So we're in springtime right now. I'm trying to plan for food preservation season. So I know right now, as the plants are itty bitty and as things are finally starting to trickle in from the garden, that I need to have the discipline to preserve something every day throughout the spring and summer and maybe into the fall, or I will get behind, and I don't want to get to that point. So at some time during the day, if I can put, you know, a handful of kale in the freezer, or put something in the freeze dryer, like pour a whole bunch of excess milk in the freeze dryer because I don't have time to make cheese that day or something, doing some kind of food preservation every single day during the busy season is part of how I can stay ahead. I want to acknowledge as well that I have a lot of videos out there where I'm making like mozzarella, I'm making bread, I'm making kefir, I'm doing all these things. I'm doing a lot of stuff on video that I don't do those every day, and I don't even do those things throughout the entire year. I've said it before where I have like a sourdough season. For me, sourdough season is usually in the end of fall and into winter, into early spring, because that's when I have the time and the capacity to remember it. So just like how I don't necessarily make breakfast every day, and I don't necessarily make dinner every day, I don't necessarily make 2 loaves of bread every day, I don't necessarily have my kefir out year round. I definitely don't have my kefir out year round. I don't make yogurt every week. I fit in things where it makes sense to. There are some things, there's non-negotiables built into every day. There's things that just have to get done that I don't have any other option but to do them, like, you know, tending to the animals, milking the goats. But there's other things like the sourdough, like the kefir, that really there's a little bit of wiggle room there, so I get to pick and choose where I want to put my priorities. And obviously there's only so many hours in the day, so sometimes things get a little bit left behind. Like last year it was my bees. I didn't do anything with my bees because I was so focused on other things. I'm trying to do better by my bees this year. I haven't been back into my bee colony since the last time I took a video on it, but we have had quite a few swarms that instead of keeping, I have given them away because I know somebody else is going to be able to give them the attention that those bees need. I still have a couple colonies, but my bees happen to be the low end. They happen to be the thing that I think about the less, because bees are pretty self-reliant. They don't need me like the goats need me, and so they're usually not up there on my priority, unfortunately. And having said that, it's important to acknowledge that when you have a lot going on, you can do a lot of things pretty well, but usually you can't do a lot of things exceptionally well. So we will not be able to do everything that we do to the most ideal way of doing things. Here's an example. I got a comment the other day, and I'm not saying this because this commenter was wrong or shouldn't have given the advice or anything like that, but I think it's interesting to kind of share my perspective on this. So I shared, I think it maybe was, are you choking on cud? Choking on cud? In that like day in the life video that I posted, I weeded a little bit of the garden and I threw the weeds just into the walkway there to let them kind of compost down. And someone had commented, and this is very good advice, it is a good idea, to put those weeds in a bucket and fill the bucket with water, and in I think like 3 to 5 weeks you've got a really nice fertilizer that kind of just is created out of those weeds and things breaking down, and that nutrition can be added back into the garden without having to, you know, put the weeds back in the garden and risk them potentially rerooting or reseeding or something like that. Excellent idea. There are things like that that seem small and simple, and on the surface they really are. But when you add a bunch of those little things to your everyday, sometimes that is how things can become overwhelming. A lot of little things that you feel like you should be doing in order to make the most out of everything that you're doing, that can add up and just create a situation where it is too much. So sometimes it's more important that we develop the discipline to weed the garden before we maybe venture into making something out of those weeds. So if I'm having a hard time figuring out how to weed the garden, I need to put my attention on simply weeding the garden first, and then maybe if I have the capacity later on, I can think about what to do with those weeds. I did kind of touch on this in a video recently where I talked about the burden of abundance on a homestead. There's a lot that can be procured off of a homestead, and there's not always something to do with that abundance. And so I will link that video at the end of this one. It's definitely related. It's on the same vein as this video. Think about what you need to do, weed the garden, and focus on that. And maybe what you could do, like make the compost tea out of the weeds, and decide, do I need to do that right now, or do I need to focus my abilities on something else that needs doing? So stuff like that is not bad, like I mentioned. It's just not something that I normally think about because I have my head and my hands in so many different pots. I have tried to treat my goats holistically for things, and I found that I don't have the capacity for that. A lot of times when you're trying to give like an herbal dewormer, you need to do so like 4 times a day for X amount of days. Ow! Winnie! Now I'm bleeding. Oh, no more pacifier for you. I have so many things going on throughout the day that I do not have the capacity to remember that I need to come out to the goats 4 times a day and treat them with herbal wormers. It's a lot easier for me to treat with something like ivermectin or panicur or what have you, because that's what I have the capacity for. Ma'am, I am bleeding. I am bleeding. Are you sorry? And for an example for the garden, I bought a granulated fertilizer this year that I'm amending a lot of our spaces with. I have used a lot of our manures and things and some of our compost and some of our new raised beds that we're putting together, but that took that resource away from my garden, and instead of trying to come up with more compost, for this year I bought Trifecta Plus. It's a granulated fertilizer, and I've been putting that in the bottoms of the planting hole to amend the space, and that's helping me save a little bit of time this year while I focus on other things. As you homestead and as you do all of these different tasks year by year and day by day, you'll find that a lot of these things get easier with time. A lot of stuff just becomes second nature. We are getting to the point where I feel like I can take my sourdough through spring and summer because I've done it enough now where I feel like it's genuinely not taking me as much time as it used to. It doesn't take me as much headspace to try to brain how to deal with sourdough because I've done it so much. And so that kind of thing does happen over time. You get in a rhythm with stuff that used to take a lot of brain power and a lot of time genuinely doesn't after you do it so many times. And so we're getting to that point with our sourdough right now, and it has happened with other different aspects of life in the past. I can remember when my husband and I first got married, his mom used to make them chicken and dumplings a lot, and it used to seem like a big ordeal for me to make chicken and dumplings, to make the dumplings from scratch. I don't know why, but it took me forever, and it took me not only to make it, but it took me forever to clean up too, and it was just this big task that was hard for me to do, and now it's really nothing to whip up, you know, some chicken and dumplings on any kind of Tuesday evening. So have some grace for yourself. Definitely understand that no two situations are alike, and give yourself some time. Add things on as they make sense, as you have the capacity to deal with them. Understand that not every day is going to look the same. There are going to be some days where you're just zapped, and maybe somebody else can come in and take a little bit of the responsibility off of your shoulders. Try your best not to just make homesteading another grind, another hustle, another thing that you have to, I don't know, burn yourself out in order to do. That is not the point. I have another video that I made last year that I will link at the end of this one as well. It is on, is self-sufficiency really where homesteaders should be putting their focus. And I don't think it is. I don't think that we should be focused on trying to be completely sufficient where we're at on our own pieces of land. I think that there is a lot of value in community and community sufficiency, because when you do have that lack, when you do have that need, there's going to be somebody else in your community, whether it's your direct family or it's somebody else in your extended, neighborhood or something like that, that can help pick up for you where maybe you're lacking, or maybe something didn't go right. An example of that for us this year is I failed to prep the area where I'd like to grow corn at the end of last year, and I'm discovering that it's really hard, Winnie, and I'm discovering that it's really hard to try to make that work and force that to work this year in the space that I had set out for it. And that's okay. We do have a lot of farm stands in our area that sell corn really cheaply, and I'll probably elect to learn from this experience, buy the corn from my Amish friends this year, and prepare better for the corn for next year. Instead of trying to break my back and sweat it out just to make it work, corn is cheap enough and it's not worth all of that hassle. I can just do it right next time and treat this as a learning experience. Please let me know if you have any more questions, if you need any more clarity, if you need some support. I'm here for you. That's why I do this at all. I get so many comments and emails from people. I didn't realize I was gonna get emotional. I get a lot of comments and emails from people letting me know how much the channel, in our experience and sharing our authentic life, how much it has inspired and encouraged and lifted you up, and I want to keep that up. That's the whole point. That's why we do what we do. We want to show you our lives. We want to be authentic with you and how we achieve the things that we achieve and how we fail at the things that we don't achieve, because I think it's so valuable. I think that this community is just as important as the community that you can get in your direct areas, your direct neighbors and things. Being able to provide the encouragement on this platform has been a massive blessing to my life, and I appreciate you.